You ever sit with people? Everything around you looks completely normal. The conversation is flowing. People are talking, laughing, reacting, and you're right there in it. You're listening, nodding, responding at the right times. Everything on the surface looks exactly the way it's supposed to look, but at the same time, there's this quiet feeling in the background that something isn't fully clicking. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way that you can point to and say, something is wrong. Just a subtle distance, like you're present, but not completely inside the moment, like you're participating without fully feeling connected to what's happening. And the more you notice it, the harder it becomes to ignore. And what makes it confusing is that there's no obvious reason for it. You're not alone. You're not uncomfortable. You're not even disengaged. You understand what's being said. You can follow the conversation easily. You can respond when needed. Everything is technically working, but internally, something still feels incomplete, like the moment doesn't fully land, like there's a layer missing between you and the experience itself, and you can't explain it. Because nothing is visibly wrong, because what's happening isn't visible from the outside. It's happening inside your processing. While everyone else is experiencing the conversation at one level, your mind is operating at another. You're not just hearing what's being said. You're thinking about what it means, what it implies, how it connects to other things, what's underneath it, what it could lead to. And all of that happens automatically, without effort. So instead of one simple moment, your brain turns it into multiple layers at once. And when your brain does that, it changes your timing. Because while the conversation moves forward in a straight line, your mind branches out, it expands, it explores different directions. So by the time you come back to respond, the moment has already shifted, slightly. And that creates a subtle but noticeable feeling of being out of sync, not far behind, just enough to feel like you're not completely aligned with what's happening. That's why it shows up in ways that are small, but consistent, like when someone is explaining something and you're already thinking about what they're going to say next before they finish, or when you respond automatically, but later realize that your response didn't reflect everything you were actually thinking, or when you're in a group and you're following along, but part of your attention is somewhere deeper, processing meaning, instead of just staying in the interaction. And even though you're physically there, something in you feels slightly removed. And over time, you start to notice that you're almost always in two states at once. One part of you is engaged, talking, reacting, staying present, while another part of you is observing, analyzing, connecting ideas. And those two states don't always move at the same speed, which creates that quiet gap between you and the moment. And sometimes it doesn't stop there, because after the interaction ends, your mind goes back, replaying what was said, thinking about what you noticed, analyzing it more deeply. Now that you have time, seeing things you didn't fully process in real time. And now the moment continues, even after it's over. Not because you're stuck, but because your brain didn't finish processing while it was happening. If you've ever had that experience, where a moment doesn't fully hit until later, where you go back to it in your mind and start seeing more than you did at the time, think about the last time it happened and drop it in the comments, because this pattern is more common than it seems. Most people would assume this has something to do with social ability, like maybe you're not engaging enough, or something about the interaction isn't working. But that's not what's happening. The issue isn't how you interact. It's how you process. It's how your brain expands what would normally stay simple. Your brain doesn't stop at what's said. It keeps going. It looks for meaning, context, patterns, connections, and because of that, every interaction becomes something more than what it appears to be. Not in an overwhelming way, but enough that it changes how the moment feels. For most people, conversations stay on one level. They hear something, they respond to it, and they move on. They don't need to process beyond that. They don't need to interpret or expand it, so the moment feels complete as it happens. But for you, the moment doesn't feel complete right away, because your brain is still working on it, still expanding it, still connecting it to other things. And that delay creates the feeling that something is missing, even when nothing is actually wrong. So there's a constant mismatch between the simplicity of the interaction and the complexity of your processing And that mismatch creates distance, not a big distance, just enough to feel like you're not fully in the same place as everyone else. And trying to force yourself to feel connected doesn't work because connection for you isn't just about being there physically. It's about your mind being aligned with the moment. And when your brain is operating at a different depth, that alignment doesn't happen naturally. But when you do find someone who thinks in a similar way, who processes things with similar depth, everything changes. The conversation feels easier, more natural, more engaging, not because it's faster, but because it matches your internal processing. And that contrast is what makes everything clearer, because it shows you that the problem isn't your ability to connect, it's the level at which most interactions happen, compared to the level at which your brain operates. But those moments are rare, because most people don't process things that way. And that's why most of the time, you feel slightly disconnected, not fully separate, just not completely in sync. And over time, that becomes tiring, not because of people themselves, but because of the constant effort it takes to stay engaged in something that doesn't fully match your depth, the constant adjustment, the constant awareness of that gap. That's also why you might withdraw at times, not because you don't want connection, but because it's easier to step back than to stay in something that doesn't fully connect. And that can be misunderstood from the outside. But this isn't a flaw. It's not something broken. It's a difference in how your brain processes the world, a difference in depth, in complexity, in how you engage with information and interactions. Most people engage at the level of what's happening. You engage at the level of what it means, and that difference changes everything about how connection feels. So if you've ever felt like you don't fully fit into most interactions, like something is always slightly off, even when everything seems fine, it's not because you can't connect. It's because your brain is looking for something deeper than what's usually there. So the shift isn't to force yourself to match every situation, it's to understand your own processing, to recognize what your brain is doing instead of judging it. Not trying to be more social, not trying to force connection, but recognizing when something doesn't match your depth and not treating that as a failure. Next time you feel that gap, don't rush to fix it. Don't assume something is wrong. Just notice it, observe it, understand it for what it is, because that gap isn't a problem to solve. It's information. It's showing you the difference between your internal processing and the level of the interaction. So if you've ever felt like you're around people, but not fully connected, like you're part of the moment, but not completely inside it, it's not because you're distant. It's because your mind operates at a different depth than most situations require. And that difference isn't always easy. But it's also what makes your connections meaningful when they do happen. So if this felt familiar, consider subscribing, because this is exactly what we're going to keep breaking down.